Dayton Council Meeting.
Well,
Is the sound on? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'd start with what we found. That's fair with that, but they can come up.
Could you pull the mic closer, please? Thank you.
They need some help from Mr. Smith on this, but, so in front of you is dated December 10th, 2001, was the sixth draft copy of service utility agreement. And, as you thumb through this, there's language in here about issuing credits for sewer line. At that time was being proposed to go to the south end of the church's property. One, two, three. On the fourth page, conditions for service. At the bottom, it talks about, 12-inch line from manhole 1 to manhole 2. When you turn the page, and it talks about, MH3, MH4, which are manhole 3 and manhole 4, and extending, the proposed line to manhole 4. And then there's a lot of talk after that in the following paragraphs about the owner-developer, receiving credits, for all this work. And Tammy and I also went through some board minutes, and there's a lot of discussion in those board minutes prior to this being written that talked about credits and what the credits look like, how does the town do the credits, and so on and so forth. So that's December 10th of 2001. We're getting into the board minutes. Bear with me, there's a lot of paper here. Everybody received board minutes. And, we start out at November 29th in that meeting, and talking about the service utility agreement, and the town would agree to pay some amount at a later time as the stormwater or sewer become available, and so on and so forth. It talks a little bit about the church agreeing to put in sidewalks and so forth, and it goes on to the December 3rd meeting. That was from the November 29th meeting. At a December 3rd meeting, the town basically passed off the service utility agreement to the church, to Mr. Adams, and at that time he offered a check for the amount that was due, which was $28,510. As a show of good faith. We get into January, Mr. Adams brings the service utility agreement back to the board. And all indications are that it's the final service utility agreement. The board, Mr. Adams brings it back to the board at the January meeting. It's taken under advisement so that the board members can review it, and then at February's meeting, the board approves the service utility agreement. So the big changes in between the draft and the signed copy is that all the language about extending the water line beyond manhole number 2 is gone, and all the language about credits is gone from that utility the approved service utility agreement. And there's also references made that the church would, that the town required and the church agreed to do things as shown on the plan. And the plan is what's stapled is half of the plan. What's stapled to your attachment is half the plan. I've got a copy of the full plan, and that was on there. The plan that the town approved is this plan, provided by BF&S. And that's pretty tough to read. Here's the blow-up section of the area around manhole 1 and manhole 2. So the approved plan shows a 12-inch line, and it shows that 12-inch line stopping at manhole number 2.
Could we get the copies of that, Michelle?
Yes. So my point is, you know, I was on the town council at that time, Mike Harris was on town council. John Carson was on the town council, he spoke 2 meetings ago. You know, Mike Smith with BF&S is actively involved naturally in this service utility agreement and all these plans. So my point is, you know, the town and the church were going down one road, and that road being the sewer line would go all the way to the end of their property, and there would be the manhole number 3 and manhole number 4 that's referenced. And that there would be some type of a credit issue for the church to put those lines in. You know, after, you know, other board members negotiated with the church sometime in the December time period, December to early January time period, that evidently changed. That language was removed from the service utility agreement on both the credits and extending the line. And, you know, the bottom line is the church signed that agreement. John Carson spoke 2 weeks ago, talked about signing that agreement. And the town of Dayton signed that agreement. Mike, I guess if you wouldn't mind weighing in, it's evidently common practice to have in a contract like a service utility agreement, credits, if credits are to be issued. I mean, the purpose of the contract is to spell out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mike Smith, Public Criminal Sector. Yeah, the whole purpose of the utility service agreement is to take both parties and say, you want service owner developer, here are the stipulations, and for that service, here's what we'll give you. So this process, the utility service agreement, is used by the city of Lafayette, and that basically, that's where we got set this up from. The city did it a long time ago. And so the procedure is that if there's any kind of credits for oversizing or extending, you know, at the request of the owner, that's included in the agreement. So, I mean, we normally include it.
Sure.
So that's part of the policy.
That makes sense.
I mean, they go together if you're going to do one. And the reason is because you're saying, okay, yeah, we're going to give you service, but you have to do this, this, and this if you want the service. And so that all goes in the same contract.
Right.
One thing I'd like to make a comment that when you're reading from this that you found.
Speak up, please.
The owner developer also agrees to design an additional extension from point manhole 2 described to the south end, the owner developer's described property, and make manhole 4 the new town limits. So everything we talk about tonight is the south end of the property is the annexed property that the contract was on, that was negotiated on. It had nothing to do outside the town limits. The same way when you guys negotiated with our contract on the west side of the road, it goes down to the town limits and nothing outside. So everything in the same way, you know, everything is manhole 4. That's the town limits. That's not on down.
What you are looking at is the draft copy that is before the approved copy.
Does it have manhole 4 in there, in the approved copy?
No, the approved copy does not have manhole 4 because
The approved
evidently
copy,
that was, so what you're looking at there is a draft copy. If it's in the approved copy, then
well, it's in every piece of,
it's.
but it's not in, you're right, it's not in the approved copy.
Right.
So nothing is in the approved copy, what I see. and it's-
Nothing that is owed is in the approved copy. You know, the church, the church, according to the board member, the board minutes, you know, the town presented Mr. Adams, and he left the building with the service utility agreement, and then we come back in January and on into February, and we have a different agreement with the site plan attached to it,
That's okay.
and everybody signs that.
My only point is, whatever we talk about has nothing to do with the land outside the town limits. Our town could not negotiate with property outside the town limits. Let me finish.
I don't think that's.
Let me finish, please.
I don't think that is relevant to
Can I
this
finish?
conversation.
Can I finish, Ashley?
This conversation
Can
is
I
about
fin-
a service
Can I
utility
finish?
agreement and the three
Can
items.
you put,
that the
who's
church
in
has.
charge of this meeting? Can I let you talk? Can I talk?
Ashley's in charge of it.
Of course he is. But I'm saying it is relevant to this meeting. It's all got to do with oversizing and credits and everything going down to the town limits. We just need to clarify that so people out here aren't sitting here. We're talking about some extension all the way down there, or credits all the way down there, or whatever. It's only to the town limits. Then we can go from there. We can decide whether we need to credit them or not credit them, whether what's in here is right or wrong. But just so we clarify where that town limit is.
I was there too. Town limit was to MH4, correct? The south side of the church property. That was the MH4.
Yeah,
Right.
of the annex property.
So they were required, before it got down to the final thing, to extend that to the end of the property.
Extend what, to the pipes or the easement, which one?
Use the pipe.
The pipe?
Yes. So when it all came
No, they
back,
weren't, it doesn't say that in there. And in our
You're-
development
you're
guide,
required-
and in our development guide, in our
extend the
ordinance.
utilities to the end of the
Well,
property.
Mike, then we violated our own, we went against the law and violated our own ordinance, because our ordinance and our utility, our development guide says that we can ask them to extend it on down there, but they just have to take it to the first point of connection. They do not have to take it on down the road.
This is a mute point for this meeting. You know, the church clearly states the three items of, that they want us to consider. And, you know, the bottom line is there is no pipe out there, okay? But whether it's at the town limits or into the property or wherever it may be, so it's irrelevant to conversation. The conversation is about, you know, oversized credits for one thing, and
You brought up, I was only answering because you brought up about the south end of the property, and I was clarifying what the south end of the property is, so we're all in the same thing.
the signed agreement, it'll take me a minute to find it, talks about going to a south end, for lack of, don't quote me on this, the south end of a property. So,
Well, here, I'll
We
read
can- we
something.
can-
Extensions shall be constructed to the point of service for the particular development.
What's
The
your-
developer is not required to extend said utility extensions through the project area to the limit of their property boundary. It's not. That's in the cost recovery. Then in the town ordinance and the development guide, it says, in order to facilitate further expansion or development, the town may require the developer to oversize utility lines or extend utility lines through the proposed development. It may ask to go through the proposed development. Costs for oversizing and extension or extensions beyond the area to be served, that's the first point of connection, by the developer will be the responsibility of the town. So anything past that initial point of their property on oversizing or anything is a responsibility of the town.
Unless you negotiate something else. but
Well, then you're
yes.
negotiating against your own, you gotta change your ordinances and stuff to negotiate, and it's not in there anyway, so. You can't just break the law, you just can't, that's why we make laws and ordinances, you just can't break
They
it.
can.
You know, that's, you gotta change that ordinance first.
I agree with what you're saying. If not, they pay the credits, but the town has the right to have them go all the way to their property.
They can ask.
Or,
Yeah.
right, so,
If
when
they
all
pay.
that language was taken out about going to MH4, and the credits were taken out as well, is because Paul and John were out there and decided, well, we won't make you go to the end of the property if you upside to this MH2.
That's
Well, that
correct.
takes all the credits out of it. It took the credits out of it too. They won't have to pay to go all the way to the end of the property if they just pay
They
the
never
upside
did have to
12.
pay.
And John Carson, which is one of the signers for the church on the approved service utility agreement, basically said that exact same thing 2 meetings ago when he was here.
Well, and I was also the negotiator between Pastor John Carson, the builder, and the council at the time, because they couldn't even come to some of the meetings because there's so much animosity and hatred by some of the members on the old board. So I remember, Cindy and I would come, we'd meet with church, and we'd come to the board, you know?
And
So
this,
there's a lot of,
this, all these negotiations to get, you know, again, you know, this, you know, we're up to the final copy is the 7th copy of the service utility agreement. You know, this was not taken lightly. This happened over the course of several years, is that correct? 2 years? Okay, so there was 2 years of negotiating to get to this final copy. So, you know, these, leaving language out, you know, just didn't happen by accident.
so do we want to go through each point here, like one at a time? We have a letter from the church requesting certain things. Do you want to just go down 1, 2, 3, 4?
Can we,
Comments
can
from
we
the
make
church?
motions and vote on this tonight or not? Or
Yes.
This is what the meeting was about from the last 2 meetings. We kept saying, last meeting we were supposed to vote, and we extended it to this one. That's what this is about. We can vote for it, we can vote it down, we can do something, we got to vote something.
And the church's letter to the town of Dayton for the items to, for consideration. Item number 2, you know, the church is asking for, for oversized credits in the amount of $20,511. So my motion is,
Well, wait a second, why don't we start with item 1 and go right down? in
Any
order?
comments from
Item,
anybody?
and then the people, before we make motions, the state guy said we got to open it to the public, you know? Let the people out here talk too, but we ought to start with 1, 2, 3, and 4, right down in order. So does the public want to talk? Anybody want to say?
who's running the meeting? Okay.
Cindy Marsh, 749 Shady Lane. In order for you to require the church to extend it to the town limits and pay for it, by your reasoning, you gave up the requirement that they would have to pay for that, or do that, for oversizing the pipes. When we have an ordinance that says, A, they didn't have to pay for it. If you asked for it to be extended, yes, they would extend it, but you would pay for it. It can't be both. It can't be that, oh, we're gonna make you do this, and we're gonna make you oversize the pipes, and you have to pay for them both, but we won't make you pay for something that we're supposed to pay for anyway, because it's negotiated out. I mean, it's all illogical. It goes in circles. It does not make a bit of sense what you're trying to say. I've heard people say, oh, I've been told that the town already paid for it. That was stated at one of these meetings. I've been told that, well, John Carson was there and it was negotiated out, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, we have an ordinance. Yes, that copy was signed. That copy did have mistakes on it, which they described at the last meeting after the ordinance was signed. Mr. Smith had to fax the town and do a correction, because the correct easement to the town limits was not included in the utility service agreement. Do you have a copy, does he have a copy of that? Yeah. Okay, so, it wasn't perfect. It did not include everything it needed to be included, or needed to be included. But we do have the ordinance that says the town is responsible for extending the pipes, or for the oversizing the pipes. And just because it was left out of the final agreement does not relieve the town of its obligation of what the ordinance says. Does it, Ashley?
Yes, it does. It's a contract supersedes
Well,
ordinance.
then you violated the contract. You breached the contract when you didn't do the stormwater thing. So I don't know why they haven't already taken you to court. But you breached that contract. The service agreement was flawed. You knew you had them over a barrel because they wanted to have a grand opening of the sanctuary, and they wanted to get moving and get it done with. And they signed the agreement that I think they were strong-armed into, and it had its errors, and one of them I just pointed out to you, and I don't think that was the only one either.
So 2 years of negotiation,
2 years of
Six
negotiation that ended
six
up with a
previous-
flawed agreement.
misstating the easement's one thing. The final map does show the 40-foot easement on it, so,
Final map does not show a 40-foot easement. What final
I
map?
believe it does, but, we've heard from Mr. Smith, an expert in this area, that if credits were to be given, they would. How ironic that credits were described in the previous drafts leading up to this. Obviously this was a hot subject at the time, these credits and stuff, and for them to be mistakenly left out of the final agreement, I think is preposterous.
I think it's preposterous that the town has an ordinance that says that the town is responsible for paying for oversizing the pipes, and they're responsible for paying if the lines are extended. And apparently, our engineering firm doesn't even know that, because he said, and Michelle said, that developers have to take it to the end of the property, and that is not what our ordinance says. It's not what the development guide says, and it's not what the cost recovery program says. So I don't understand any of your reasoning, except that you're trying to twist the church in knots and yank it around like you've been trying to do for 20 years.
So is our agreement that you guys have with us on our side of the road with utilities, is that a legal agreement now or not? Or can it just be changed on a whim? Or do we go against our ordinances or
We're not
what?
discussing your side of the road right now.
Well, what you do on this side of the road has to do with our side of the road, because it's the
Not
same
tonight.
thing.
I have a question. Well, the church property, some of it is in the town and some of it's out of the town.
Right.
So I believe that there's a different legal standard in the ordinance depending on whether the extension is in town limits or outside the town limits. Because when you look at 150.046, which is ordinance 99.6 that the town cited, that's part D that everyone has looked at, saying that the church should be owed the credits, but for this ordinance C, if it applies. So I'm not saying it does because of where the land is, but when you look at C, it says extension of water and sewer lines from a point of connection into the existing municipal system to and throughout the proposed development shall be the responsibility of owner, developer of this subdivision or addition, and shall be at his or her sole expense. And then it goes on to say that the town may require an extension or oversize. So I think that there are different standards, different requirements of the ordinance, depending on what type of extension you're doing.
With all due respect, Reed, I don't see anything that says there's a different standards. It says that the developer is responsible for extending them to to where they're connecting. And point C, as you said, says that the developer needs to come back and hook up into the existing municipal system, and then throughout the proposed subdivision, which would be what's going to be happening with the proposed subdivision down the road. But that's got nothing to do with the church. The church only needed it to the church building. That's the only place they needed it.
No,
Where does
but
it say they have to
The
extend
point
it
of
past that?
connection too, Michelle, I got an email from Michelle. I asked what the point of connection is for the developers and stuff, and it's back at the first corner of the church. The northwest corner of the church is the point of connection. So,
But on the church's property, when the utility service agreement was signed, they would have been the owner of the developer.
That's right.
So it's,
Yeah,
It
so
does
they
have
had
to
to
do
take
with
it to their point of contact.
So it would extend across the entire,
Where does it
their
say it's
property.
extended across the entire
it
property?
doesn't say ever they have to
that
take it
anywhere.
across their property.
Nowhere does it say that.
It says,
so what this whole
it just says right here.
ordinance says, if it applies, it's only, so it says where town utilities are extended beyond the current town corporation limits and prior to rendering water or sewer utility service to the properties outside the current town corporate limits, the landowner of the property to be served shall agree to the following.
Okay,
So that's why I'm saying there's a different legal standard, and, you know, this whole section applies if you are extending outside of the town limits. And that's probably why you're reading a different ordinance that applies to the development guide.
Reed, I'm not sure if you're aware that the church property was annexed into the town of Dayton, so it was in the town limits.
part of it
But
was,
The
In the
part
town
that,
limits?
that the utility service agreement is concerned with is in town limits.
Everything's based on the
Everything is
agreement on
based
the
on
annexed land, nothing
the annexed
outside
land.
the land, nothing. It's all on the, inside the land. And then all your development guides and everything says they don't even have to take it across.
but the bottom line is, the line stopped at manhole number 2. So what we're discussing about in town, out of town, I mean, it's a new point, because none of it ever got in the ground. It stopped at manhole 2 at the west of the.
Because that's as far as it had to go. That is as far as it had to go by our ordinance, by the development guide, or the cost recovery program. It did not need to go any further.
And that is what the church agreed to in the service utility agreement?
So
And
you're
the town
saying
agreed to.
that you were discriminating against the church by making them meet higher standards than you would have held anyone else to? That you would go against the ordinance, the development guide, and the cost recovery program, and make them do something that you would make no one
Well,
else
they
do?
made them put in 2 sewage lines
Well, I
at the
know
cost of
that,
$40,000 and $44,000 when they didn't have to do it. That was just a vendetta. They made them move it 100 foot after they'd already let them put it in once.
I'm saying that there is a service utility agreement, a contract that was signed by the town of Dayton and the
That the
church.
town of Dayton breached, I might add.
You know,
You
that's,
broke your own
Well,
law by
is
signing
there-
it, actually.
Is there a system of pipes and ditches for the stormwater to go to?
we're talking
No,
about,
there's not.
we're talking
That's what
about
the-
a water sewer system right now, so,
Yeah.
in this context. Yes.
We're talking about what the church has asked for, which concerns the stormwater and the
It's all the same,
oversizing of the
yeah, it's all the
pipes.
same property. You're asking about 3 things. Okay, number 1 is the stormwater recovery fee.
Now, wait. Let's take these one at a time. We're on,
How about number 1 first?
so we spent the last half hour talking
Yeah,
about number
comments,
2. You know, Mr.
Comments.
Smith, I don't know if you want to add anything to this or not. You're welcome to if you'd like.
The item D that we're talking about, in order to facilitate future expansion or development, the town may require the developer to oversize utility lines, so they have the choice, or to extend utilities through the proposed development. Cost for oversizing and/or extension beyond the area to be served by the developer, which is his property. The area to be served by his development is his property, will be the responsibility of the town, beyond his property.
Beyond this.
Well, it doesn't say property there, it says area served.
Area served.
It doesn't say property, that's interpretation. Just want to clear that and make sure that's on
And they're
record.
not certain.
I'm just telling you that that's the way we normally interpret it.
So if Dave wanted to talk.
Anyone else, I can't see anyone wanted to speak.
Anybody else want to speak?
I mean, all this is Steve Shuley's 7315 Weston Drive. I mean, I haven't seen all the documentation, I haven't had time to study it. But up until we found that document, there was a lot of question marks. But if we have a signed agreement between both parties, that both parties signed and agreed to, then I don't understand the question. I mean, if they were promised something and they weren't given it in that agreement, then we owe it to them. But from what I heard, and again, I haven't read the documents, but what I've heard, it doesn't sound like it. I mean, there were talk of sidewalks and all kinds of other stuff too that I know for a fact aren't out there. So I'm just, I want everybody to get, right is right. But if the church signed an agreement and we signed, the town signed an agreement, and everybody worked very hard on it for 2 years, and then signed it, and it's notarized, and it's a legal document, read it as a legal document.
Yes.
Okay, then I don't understand the question.
I'd like to answer something here. The reason I think, in all that negotiation, we keep saying 2 years, they fought for 2 years to get at least amicable solution to the whole thing, and I think there's a lot of fighting going on there, and the church ended up being strong-armed on some things and signed things I think they didn't want to, too. But because there was a lot of animosity on the board toward it.
I have a question on that. Number 6, that you said you gave to Bob Adams. Did the church do the alterations to the thing for Volume 7, the Draft 7 that got brought to us, or did the town do it, or did BF&S do it?
I don't know, you'll have to ask Mr. Adams, but it has to the effect that, Mr. Adams left the board meeting with the service utility agreement and, to look over, to make changes or whatever. And then the following month, in January 7th, 2002, motion was made to take the service utility agreement, which was rewritten by the Methodist Church under advisement until the next meeting. Mr. Harris seconded the motion carried. So we received the rewritten service utility agreement back at the January 7th board meeting, and we took it under advisement, before voting on it. And so the church, hopefully I can find it here.
The final
Because I'm wondering if they're saying
The church-
they were strong on it, and they made the final agreement brought it to us, and that's just the agreement that was brought to us. There's no strong-
Well, they agreed, they agreed when they put in the sewage line across our property. Remember, they had to bring sewage down to them because the town brought it to everybody else except the church.
Well, I was just-
So wait a second, so they bring it down across our property with a 100-year agreement for a cost of $40,000, $44,000. Just a short time later, before they could get their occupancy, the board says, we want you can't get your occupancy, you gotta move that line 80 foot over along Wesleyan Drive and spend another $44,000 or so to do that. Now, tell me why a board would make them do that, why a church would want to do it. They should have argued at the time and said, go to hell. But they didn't, because this board basically told them, and I was in the back room of a lot of this stuff, this board said, you're not getting an occupancy permit unless you do what we want. So they were, I think, I know they were, I saw it, and I heard comments, they were strong on it.
Well, I just want to know if, like, we changed
Moving
it
that
to
line, I
benefit the
believe,
town.
out off of your
Some-
property, which is so the town has access to it, so.
Well, you let them put it in the first place, Mike.
So
You let them put it in the first place, and a year or two later, you make them change it, so why do that?
when it came in, so they wanted to be able to have access to fix it, because you sold your property, then that.
We gave the town, we gave the church, it was a 100-year agreement, you guys could, I told the board, you guys had access to our property, we couldn't build on it or anything, you guys gave them the permission, and you made them move it. And it cost them 40-some thousand extra dollars.
So Ty,
So I think the issue with the oversizing is, we know that the contract was signed. We know what those terms say. We know that the church did oversize and did pay for it. So we know that there was no intent to pay the church for the oversizing at the time the agreement was signed. The question is,
How do we know that, say that in the contract?
yes, it does. I mean, there was no obligation, and we have
It
obligations.
says in the contract?
We have obligations of two
It
parties.
doesn't say
It
that.
doesn't say that.
We have,
Refers back to the ordinance.
we know that the town didn't breach that agreement by not paying it at that
Breach
time,
their ordinance by
Because-
writing that agreement.
because there's no obligation of the church in the agreement. It's not in the contract, but what I'm trying to get to is trying to help the church, if you could stop interrupting me. I think the best argument for the church is that, well, what we really meant, the reason that wasn't in there is because we were agreeing to have these credits delayed until future time. And so I think that is what is at issue, and what you guys need to decide. There's two interpretations, because there's not a specific sentence in that utility service agreement that says the Dayton Town Council is hereby released of its obligation to pay for the credits. Okay? That's what is just kind of not spelled out in black and white in the contract. So, I don't know if the church had any obligation or if there was any discussion for future extension, but you would think that the only reason that you would have a delay, or, in understanding that the credits would be paid in the future, is if the church was actually gonna do more development in the future that would, apply. And it also seems that if that's the case, then there hasn't been any wrongdoing by the church in the timing of it, because there hasn't been further development. But, that's really where I see the issue, and I think it would be helpful to hear from the church, if there's any evidence, or, correct me if I'm wrong, and, your understanding of why the credits are owed, even though they weren't in the contract.
The second point you made makes sense. That's not the angle we're taking, but an angle that could be the direction that you go. If you look at the three different ways, the ordinance, the development guide, the cost of recovery program, all those clearly state what we're saying. If the oversize is done, then it gets credited back. Doesn't say anywhere else anything different. In that agreement, it doesn't say anything different than anyone from the church, town attorney, or any board member signed. It doesn't say anything else. So those first drafts mean absolutely nothing. It's not executed. So if the town left it off by mistake when they're making a trade, which I do not believe that, or I wouldn't be here for 20, 30 hours, how long I've been here, over these meetings, then the town made a mistake. It's black and white on the paper. It does not say anything about issuing any credits or a trade-off of having to extend the pipes any further. In that sentence that we've read a couple times, it says cost for oversizing and or extension beyond the area to be served by the developer will be responsible of the town. It doesn't say anything about property. Also, it states that it's common practice, but it's not required. And when Mike was just up here quoting, he said normally that's an agreement. It's not an agreement, but it doesn't say 100% has to be an agreement every time. Normally isn't 100%. So could it have went back and forth during that time? I don't know. All I know is a signed agreement is the law. And in that, it doesn't say we traded anything out, we being a church. So what we've legally been advised and what we interpret, and everyone else we talk to besides people in this room that disagree, is it goes back to the ordinance. And the example of that, actually to quote you, said before with the Baker's development, when the impact study lawsuit was gone on and on and on and on and on and on, and you guys refused to put in writing, your verbatim word was, we're not going to put in writing because it's already in the ordinance. This is the exact same example. So you can't have both ways.
So you're talking about a pre-contract, you're using this, there is no contract in between MSC Development and the town of Dayton. We haven't got to their service utility agreement. Our development guide states what the town expects from a developer, okay? And to use the context that you were just speaking about, it states
They must come and get it,
that they.
correct? Where it lies.
They will come and get it.
So why would
We're
that even be in there if we're gonna extend it all the way to the property line like you're saying?
You-
That would be irrelevant. That ordinance would not even need to be.
Every single thing in an ordinance is not included in a service utility agreement. You know, you start out with ordinances to guide somebody, okay, and then in the church's case or any other case, you get to a service utility agreement, you know, where you spell out, you know, the summary of, you know, credits and costs and this, that, and the other. You know, the signed agreement, as you pointed out, you know, the number 7, you know, the final copy, you know, references, you know, a plan, okay, and that plan shows a 12-inch line in there, and it shows it stopping at manhole 2 and all that stuff. So, you know, if you're referencing a plan, I don't know necessarily that you would put in there language about, you know, the credits that we've been talking about through the previous 6 drafts, you know, are no longer applicable.
My opinion is,
You know, I think
they left out because there's no negotiation needed there, because we've shown 3 different times that the church did not need to extend past where they already currently had extended. So we weren't gaining anything by trading that off. So in turn, why would you put in an additional amount of money is owed when it already says that in the ordinance? It says that's what has to happen.
In the contract stop,
But you
contract
can't
stops at number
something
2.
different.
Contract stops at manhole number 2. You know, if something isn't gonna happen and the agreement's made, I don't know why you would put a lot of language in a contract saying, you know, this doesn't apply, that doesn't apply. You put in a contract what does apply. And what does
Correct, but it
apply,
doesn't say anything
what
about
does
trading.
apply,
You go back to the same
evidently,
conversation here. There's nothing in that contract that says, oh, we're trading anything for anything at all. We're not trading oversized
Right.
for extensions. So that's not in there. I don't know why we keep going back to the same point, but you don't have a point. It's not signed in any legal document.
it is in there.
No, it's not.
It's in there that the church agrees to do this plan. It shows 12-inch line in between manhole 1 and 2 and a couple other things, and, you know, this being capped off and that one being capped off. So it shows this plan in there.
That's not in the recorded document on February 15th that the county
No.
building currently.
Where'd that come from?
February 15th, 02.
You know,
It doesn't
Never
say
seen
anything
that.
past what's done now.
well, the town agreed to this plan, and
Is that signed by church member, church leadership? Is it signed by anyone else? No.
I don't know.
I don't see any reference in the service agreement that we're talking
So,
about.
so this
to that.
plan, you know, is with this contract, so, you know, I don't know.
Is it a draft?
Dave, my question is,
It does reference the design plans
Yes.
in the.
Yeah, the contract references design plans, these are the final design plan. You know, there was, I assume that there, you know,
It doesn't say exhibit A.
it
doesn't
looks
say-
to me like
that's
this
not
plan
labeled.
probably started out
Okay.
back in March of '01.
It says the design plans approved by the county.
Yeah.
Is that labeled? Is there an exhibit A on there? There's a list of the county building currently. I haven't seen what you're
It's
looking
not,
at.
it's not with this, but
They
it's,
just
it's there
didn't
already.
So it's assumed again.
Well,
It's not anything legally signed, is that correct?
what did your contractors use to put, when they did the work out there? I mean, did they have some type of approved plans?
Blueprints, I mean, is that correct, Bob?
That's their blueprints. That's their contractor's blueprints.
This is their contractor's blueprints, yeah. I mean, somebody had to know how to put that thing in, and, you know, we have in the board minutes that, you know, Dayton employee Max Whitlock, had inspected and approved what the church had put in.
Sure, I don't see anything different, that's why I'm trying to understand what the point is, I guess. It's stopping in the same place. It's not showing anything going further south.
Stuff's at manhole 2.
So what's the point? I'm not getting it. I mean, what am I missing here?
He's trying to
We
make.
did what the site plan said.
And manhole
And-
2 is Wesley Drive.
And you did what this, I'm sorry, you did what the final agreement said you would do.
I think Reed was.
so the contract was signed in 2002, we're now in 2019. What event would have triggered the town paying for these credits, or do you have any, you know, evidence on the course of conduct between 2002 and 2019, you know, that shows, that supports your argument that these credits were in fact owed, even though it's not, there's no obligation, it wasn't, you know, spelled out in the utility service agreement?
It's been brought up before, at the old boards, like Ron Merkel brought it up and fought for getting the credits when he was on the board from the church. He came in, and the board didn't want to do it at that time or something. They just,
We
well,
need,
it's in the minutes, Mike.
It
He
is now.
came in, he came in and he argued with it at the meetings.
We need to see that.
Because,
in the minutes.
because the old boards whisk a lot of this stuff under the table.
I've been to a lot of board minutes, meetings in my life. I've never heard one mention of credits. I've talked to former board members that are still alive, and
Well,
this
actually,
is the
I've
first.
been to every board meeting, special meeting for 18 years and never missed one. Never one. I was your town clerk for 12 years and I know what went on. I remember the old boards, people saying on the board, they're not gonna get this, they're not gonna get that unless they do this and that. There's a lot, it's just like you guys, I begged for no roads through my property, and to get no roads through my property, I had to agree to give you underground utilities for free, and that's really not my true wishes, but that's how you strong-arm me. And that's what happened back in the old
Reed, what was
boards.
the answer to your question? I didn't hear an answer.
I think that
What was,
there was,
I got,
What
was the
is
question?
it
I'm sorry.
that triggered all of a sudden that there's these credits? What is it between 2002 and 19 that's now
So, it's
the
been,
town owes you the credit?
so we haven't made any official documentation besides coming to a meeting, and board minutes show that in the past. And Mr. Adams has requested it. There was a couple, what was the other one you was talking about, Ron?
Ron Merkel.
Ron Merkel, another board member. It's been brought up in several discussions. I think we found no less than 10 different times.
Right, well, that's you, that's the church asking for the credits.
Correct, and then every time it's-
What makes the church believe that it is owed the credits when it's not mentioned in the agreement that the church signed with the city or town?
Good question. So it's not mentioned that there's any trade in lieu
Right.
of. So the way we interpret and the way we believe 100% would be, it goes back to the ordinance. And we were asked to oversize from the beginning, the 12-inch, because who in the right mind would pay extra money for that after they put in the sewage for $55,000 prior to that? And then it also states that they have 2 years to provide a utility or to return, and our stormwater that still hasn't been.
2 years from 2002. Okay,
So it's been brought up multiple times.
15 years later.
No, it isn't 15, it's been brought up, he just said
And
multiple
then
times, Steve.
Okay,
And it was, well, you weren't around back then, remember, it was brought up several
Also,
times.
in one of the Indiana codes, Indiana state statute, it states that interest and penalties are due as well. So in order to form the interest calculation, you have to have that note paid off, correct? We just paid the note off in December. So we're still within our, Reed mentioned at one point, there's a 2-year limitation on be asking the different interpretation on different codes. But, so we feel like we couldn't give it an exact interest dollar amount until we knew it.
You mentioned before that no less than 10 times that a church member has asked this board for,
I said it's been not only a church member, because I think Ron Merkel attended, but I don't know that he's a member. He's part of the congregation. I think there's other people, in the minutes, I've seen it 10 different times roughly.
10 times. Do you recall that?
I
You've
don't
been,
know, I've been here a lot of meetings.
been on the board for what,
I've never
25
seen
years?
anybody from the church come up since they got that put in.
Do you have any minutes in front of you that reference
Yeah.
Bob Adams? Yeah, I do. I don't have 10.
I don't remember.
Well,
Well,
let's say
like
5
conversation,
times
then.
or 6 times, what difference does it make if it's 10 or 5 or 6 or 2?
Do you guys have any minutes in front of you currently that you're talking about, going through? You want me to show you a minute that Mr. Adams, Bob, do you bring it up?
Is it the pages that you quoted at May's meeting? You quoted that on page, and there was like 6 different pages.
Yeah, there's some of those. No, that was stating that we didn't have to even put in anything sewer going forward at all. That the first time the sewer was moved, that it should have been done at that point. But we're not trying to fight that battle. I mean, there's all kinds of additional things that aren't even being fought here. That's what kind of baffles me. The 55,000 for the sewage from the first time that I showed you guys last time in the minutes, 3 different times it's quoted. You still copy that from last time?
I'm probably doing the same stuff.
Shows that the church has met all obligations for sewage. Says that 3 different times.
I'd have to refresh my memory on
I
what
can
it says.
take TV time out if you need to, but I gave it to you last time, it's there. So there's an additional 55,000 that was spent that should have been. We talked about that, the pond acreage.
But we're talking about the 3 requests right now at this particular meeting, correct?
Correct, but you're talking about minutes and other things in here too, so I was trying to get a couple of dots for you, but
any other president comments?
Yeah, anybody got anything else?
Bob, you have anything to add?
not too bad, I don't want to start any more argument.
Would you like me to read for you?
In 1999, town board received a bid from Milestone for $60,000 to relocate the sewer Comer Marsh property to the present location. I'm reading from your minutes.
Same minutes provided last month.
And, 99. Mike Smith said that the church should be required to pay from Dayton Road to the existing manhole. I see a project that the town wished to be done before the church asked for a building permit. And I see here that it says in your minutes, Mike Smith said the church would be required to pay for Dayton Road to the existing manhole. So at that point in time, the town was putting that in. And we was to pay for the Dayton Road to the existing manhole only. When we decided to build, and when we applied for a building permit, this changed. And at the time that we were negotiating these things, and in a minute you'll find that I was agreeing to a bunch of information, and I duly admit I wanted to see the town get some of this done for them. In that time period, I said that there was things that I'd like to see done by the church. I was not a representative of the church. I was the construction manager for the job. My purpose in wanting to see that utility service agreement was to see that the building got built and we got an occupancy permit. I did take back on the 122901, the motion made for the utility service agreement to the church, and I said, I think this is a doable thing. But at that time, the board, which consisted of Arvel Dooley, Al Baldwin, Jim Cox, and Gary Garlish, said we are not signing that agreement. So, but they said that they would make a check out, which they did. On 12/3/01, they made a check out to show their good faith. On the 5th, on March, anyway, there was the agreement after we gave the check. An agreement was brought back to us. That would have been, that was on the 13th of December, 2001. That agreement didn't have more language in it than what we'd already been talking about, and it was automatically rejected. And then we started to go into January, as Ashley was saying, and reset the things up for the agreement. At that time, the church was willing to go ahead and pay this, even though it was against the town ordinances. So, it's really up to you fellows, what you think is right, not what was in these agreements, what you think was right, what you think the the town ordinances say. And I can refer to the town ordinances, I can refer to the annexation. The annexation said, at this time, all existing proposed development is 8 to 9 Methodist Church area can be served with a sanitary sewer at least level comparable to the other areas of town. Based on above information, there is no immediate need or cost for additional municipal service to make the annex area equivalent to the service offered to the comparable areas. That was passed by the town board on September 11, 2000. The town development guide that was started in February 1999, it said in order to facilitate future expansion or development, the town may require the developer to oversize the utility lines or extend the utilities through the proposed development. Costs for oversizing and or extension beyond the area to be served by the developer will be the responsibility of the town.
Beyond the area to be served.
And we had service already on our property at the time.
So to move it at all wasn't even needed.
So, yes, the new service wasn't needed for the church at all.
Why'd you move it? I don't know.
We were told that if we didn't sign the agreement, we would not get an occupancy permit. Yes. Now, if we don't sign an agreement, we put out that money, then we'll get our occupancy permit. So basically, we had to buy our occupancy permit by this agreement. Now, the agreement disagrees with your ordinances, and it disagrees with your guidelines, and it disagrees with the annex paper. But still, it is up to you, not us, it's up to you to do what is right. We felt that this is probably what is right. If you disagree, it's your opinion, and you can turn it down. But we feel that the church is being discriminated against. For what reason, I don't know. Mr. Brown told me back then, and says, I do not see what all the fuss is about allowing the church to go ahead and do this. He was one of your board members.
I have some board minutes from December 3rd, 2001 from John Swick. Said, Mr. Swick made a motion to give an oversizing credit not to exceed $2,112 for shading lane to Westland Drive. Not required extensions from Westland to the property line to be put in until needed. A credit will be given when others connect to that line. The formula to determine that later, sidewalks will be put in on Dayton Road after the sewer line is installed. The pond will be outside the utility service agreement area and will be paid when the other 6 acres is developed. And these are conditional on the signed utility service agreement and payment received by Monday, December 3rd, 2001. And it was seconded and the motion carried.
That was in December?
December 3rd, 2001.
December 3rd, 2001?
No,
Those
right.
pages, two.
Bob, a couple of things that you mentioned there. The money that the church paid for the service utility agreement when it was executed, was $28,510. That check is for, waterworks, wastewater, and stormwater, and that it does not reflect anything as far as any construction or oversized credits or anything like that. So, the credits would be one thing, and then the amount that you pay for the cost recovery fees would be a separate issue. The credits or no credits, you still pay that cost recovery fee 28,510.
So these minutes were, what day of December? December 3rd. And then we have the December 10th draft, which is draft 6. And when you go to the summary of costs, on that, at the very bottom, that's where you have the asterisk for any credits exceeding 2,112 can be applied to future wastewater cost recovery fees of these facilities. So it looks like, there's this discussion in the minutes, December 3rd, then it was put into draft 6, but then it was taken out.
Right. And then the final draft was presented evidently at the January meeting. It was tabled. The board took it under advisement and then voted on the February meeting. And, the final references the approved plan, which shows the 12-inch pipe, and the approved plan shows capping off a couple pipes and putting in the 12-inch pipe in between manhole 1 and 2.
So I think that's the unanswered question, because when you have here that it says any credits exceeding that amount of 2,112 can be applied to future wastewater cost recovery fees, evidence is that they might have had that understanding that there would be delayed credits applied in the future. So, all we know is that that was completely taken out of the agreement, and what you guys need to decide is if that means that no credits were owed, or if that meant that all of them were just meant to be applied to future wastewater cost recovery fees.
There was other things taken out of the service utility. On draft number 6, there's a lot of language in there about, manholes 3 and 4 and, 700 and some odd feet of pipe and all that stuff. And all that is gone out of the final. And, going back to what Mike Smith had said, it's very customary to have credits and how those credits are administered and what triggers them in a service utility agreement.
But if you don't have it in that final.
I'm sorry.
The reason why it's 2,105, whatever it is, that is the sanitary sewer fees. So the town of Dayton does not have a lot of money, so the idea of a credit was so they don't have to pay out money, for oversizing and so the maximum amount was the maximum amount they anticipated getting in for the sanitary sewer, which was 2112 or whatever that is. So the whole idea with Dayton is credits for future or the maximum of what they were taking in, because you didn't have the money to pay out. If you wanted to oversize something, to go 200 extra feet, like 12 inches instead of 8 inch, and you can tell the developer, look, we'll give you credits. We're not going to pay you to do that. We don't have the money to pay you to do that. But we'll give you credits. I'm just telling you, that's how it was set up.
Right.
So there wasn't a payment that the town was going to pay. It was just credits on the future development. If it was over that 21.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, may I address the letter that we sent you? We asked for credits for this, and we suggested where those credits could be given us. We asked for those credits to be given on the 4.846 acres within the town limits, and on the 18.74 undeveloped land. We didn't ask for money. We asked for credits for that. Now, Reed told me you can't give credits on land because it's already in the town.
Well, yeah, and the
The
issue,
timeframe was it, if I want to read?
yeah, the issue is it's for all future recovery fees.
Is that the only ones that can be built on that property? On the floor acreage?
What's that?
Is that only for the stuff that can be built on that their property on the 4 acres?
So it says all future recovery fees, waterworks, wastewater, and stormwater. on the 4.46 acres within the town limits and the 13.874 undeveloped acres south of town.
Is that the one that's kind of behind the pond?
It's an L shape, yeah. There's a Dayton Road frontage, and then it goes back in an L shape behind the second parsec.
And I believe that, I think also the issue of that is just the amount. So when you look at that amount that we would be waiving, it'd be a lot more than the 20,511 that you're looking at in credits.
Per acre, right, 2,000, something like that.
The way we figure
Roughly
it-
50,000 would be what would be waived for those water works, wastewater, and stormwater future recovery fees, so.
The way we had figured out, we requested the stormwater, which was $23,230, and in lieu of the other $49,000, almost $50,000, we were asking for those future credits, which added to be roughly $58,000. Obviously, we think we're getting a deal, we probably wouldn't do it. So instead of writing a $73,000 check, we're asking for $23,000, and that one, and asking for $58,000 of credits at the current rates.
Right. So the issue that we haven't talked about is number 3, and that's the claim for interest.
Is there anything else on number 2 that anybody wants to talk about? Yes.
My understanding of it was, I wasn't privy to the conversation where you were stronger. Apparently, if Rod was, he should have stopped at 10, but I was not part of any of those meetings. All I was told is, we're not having you extend it to the end of the property if you upsize to the 12-inch thing. And I got it, Joey, to me, that's why it was left out of that final agreement, any wording about credit. Because there was a deal made. I wasn't part of it. I heard about it, but that's the reason I think the credits were left out, and some of the other wording was left out about MH3 and MH4. There was a deal made to where there was no credit switching hands, and you guys didn't have to extend it. Or they weren't going to strong arm you to extend it. But I wasn't party to that. That's why I think the agreement was written up that way. It doesn't say nothing about any credits being returned, so I gotta go with that final agreement.
And that's what John Carson spoke about 2 meetings ago, which John signed here for the church, was, to your point, that was negotiated.
According to your ordinances, if we had put that in to the town limits, we would have got, the town was required to pay for it. And I think that might have something to do with these offsets.
Well, I think, you're looking at draft number 6, there's certainly that type of language in there. When draft number 6 had language about going to manhole number 4, and it had language in there about, draft 6 had language in there about going, all the way down to manhole number 4, and there was language in there about, credits, and there was, talk in the minutes about how those credits were to be administered, prior to the final agreement being signed.
Like you're saying in the agreement, you think you have to go by that, and you think between draft 6 and 7, that there was an agreement made to sign that service agreement. I think the church and the town council realized that they couldn't force the church to extend further. I think that's why it was omitted, and there was no reason to, by the ordinance, there's no reason to include that. It already states oversight will be credited going forward.
And Dave, to your point, that probably happened. So you got draft 6 and you got draft 7, and 6 has a lot of language in it. 7 was signed by everybody, so evidently everybody's happy.
I agree, but what I'm saying is, your trade-off, there isn't a trade-off where we're not required to extend to the southernmost part of the property where we keep saying we are. So there is no trade-off. We're not getting anything, but we're gonna pay extra $20,511 for oversizing. This doesn't make any common sense.
It wasn't a trade-off, and it was an agreement.
That we agreement then, trade-off agreement. You
But it-
agreed to it.
It's reflected in the
And
final.
it ignored the ordinance.
Well, maybe future lawyers will take that up, but, To me, all I can go by as a board member is I've got a signed contract by both interested parties, and, you know, it seems to be in order, and we've got, you know, the contract references, you know, plans, and, you know, nobody's disputing these plans, you know, these plans actually happened, and, you know,
But we are disputing the plan, that's why I guess I'm not understanding still on.
well, obviously, you're, you know, you all sent a letter for a reason, and this,
Yeah.
you know, pertains to that.
So just to make sure I understand what you're saying you have to go by the service agreement, but in the service agreement, it doesn't say anything about trading oversizing for extensions. That's just something that you're connecting your own dots and think there's a handshake deal or something behind. There's nothing in there that says that, correct?
The plan,
No, I just yes or no?
it references
Yes or no?
a plan, and the plan shows 12-inch lines there in between manholes 1 and 2.
But no trade. That you're basing your whole argument off of a trade, that there is no documentation and nothing signed saying that.
I have a
There's
service
no-
utility
You're right,
agreement.
there's no documentation saying that, there's no document saying that we owe any credit either.
There is, the ordinance in 3 different ways.
No, not in the signed agreement. There's a lot in the ordinance that got left out in the final agreement that was there before.
There's
Why
nothing
did that-
contradicting
we
the
can
ordinance,
write up
so it's up to the service agreement.
We can write up the service agreements against our ordinances, against our development guide, everything that is law in this town, and we can just make that up.
Reed, does a contract trump ordinances in the eyes of the law?
He makes her that question.
Okay,
I mean, it's too broad.
okay.
I think that we kind of finished the back and forth discussion, but the town council hasn't discussed this much among themselves, like point by point, so maybe we could do that. Unless there's any.
Is there any more discussion on point number 2? No, 2.
We can vote on it.
I think we take each item one by one. I'd like to make a motion on 2.
Wait just a second before we rush into all this stuff. Maybe we ought to discuss option 1 too, because I think all of it rolls together.
No, I think there are 3 distinct items.
So of course you would, actually.
Well, so it's a big concern, huh?
So does this mean nothing? Speak up, please.
What are you asking, Danny?
Oh, about when Swick made a motion to give oversizing credit not to exceed the 2112. I just, in that paragraph from the minutes,
That was in December.
from, well,
That was before the final draft.
correct.
That's when we're working on draft number 6, which you'll have a copy of.
The other day I asked him, he said there's credits cut.
Well, I've asked him that too, and he's disputed that.
He disputed,
Credits.
he told me himself there was credits, we told him we'd give him credits, and he told you they wouldn't give him credits?
I asked John about giving church, Methodist church credits, and
He said no.
no, he did not feel there was any duties.
I think they're saying
Well, maybe he might have.
Yeah,
But
well,
they got
yes,
extra
this
ones.
is what.
You got it right in the minutes there, but he said credits.
Well, that's when they were talking about draft number 6, going down the manholes 4. You know, that was the service utility agreement that was up on the table at that time.
Well, he's always said it the other day, we always promise them credits, so we always promise.
This, per se, you still need as a motion, because it's not intended.
Could you have the number 7 draft?
If I can find it.
That's what this is.
Hold on.
Yes, number 7, the final, number 7 is the final.
Number 6 is that.
Oh, was that?
I think you just have to take it all together. I mean, you know, this was a separate discussion. There was a motion made regarding a contract that was signed later. And so, you know, you can take that into account. You know, all that it says is that they were discussing that they were not going to pay more than $2,112 for
On
the
here,
credits.
it's not to exceed, but in there, it says anything exceeded.
Would be applied to the future.
Right, right.
Mhm. So I think it's clear that the town was not going to pay, I mean, at any point, they were not going to pay for anything more than 2,112, but they might have provided credits for more than that. That's
The
what we
con-
don't know.
The contents of the credits might be when they were talking about going down to proposed manhole number 4.
Well, I mean, I think it is, I mean, important to note that
Future credits, you know, based on somebody else looking on and
even with the change in the scope of work from draft 6 to 7, the upsizing was done. You know, payments were made, so we know that, you know, there were credits. It's just, the question is what happens with them, you know? Does church ever get them? They certainly didn't have there was no intent to give them to them or pay anything to them at the time. That's clear.
I don't follow where you said there was credits.
But I guess all I'm saying is we know that they did upsize, and we know that they did pay $20,000 for that upsizing.
They put in what was agreed to in between the church and the town as far as the
You're right, Lee, they upsized, and they upsized according to what the board wanted, from 3 different of our ordinances and development guides say the town pays for that.
They put in what the town and the church agreed to be done out there, which is the 12-inch in between 1 and 2.
I'm going to read some minutes again from December 3rd, 2001. Mr. Bumbleberg said that the agreement needs to be cleaned up and some of the language needs to be updated. The immediate issue is signing the agreement so the church can get water service to the building. The second issue is giving credits, which will take longer. If the council agrees to do this, it will be the only place he is aware of that gives credits to reimburse the cost of installing the line above oversizing credits. Mr. Bumbleberg said that he believes the council is trying to do what they believe is fair. An amendment can be added to state the sidewalks will be installed when the sewer line is installed. Mr. Bumbleberg said that he cannot recommend waiving the storm sewer fee. This would set a precedence for others. The easement needs to be obtained from Mr. Kohler, and the easement from Westland to their property line needs to be dedicated to the town at the same time. Mr. Bumbleberg advised Mr. Adams to sign the agreement, pay the fee, and then work on as an amendment so they can get the water turned on.
In the next paragraph, you know, it's also interesting, you know, he talks about, you know, extending the line all the way to the far property line.
The annex property.
At that time, Mr. Swick said that we'll have to come up with a formula to calculate a reimbursement. Mr. Bumbleberg said that could be, said the only thing Dayton is doing different than other communities in the area is allowing to put an extension in for later and work out a right way to be reimbursed by future developers for the extension.
Tyron, so what you were saying that payment was made, and Joe, the attorney at the time, said to keep negotiating, keep talking about it afterwards, to finalize other items, so we can get water on, is that correct?
Yeah, it said to amend the contract so you can rush the water to get turned on.
So that kind of clearly states that there's more to come.
And this was December 3rd, which was before the December 10th meeting, that 6th draft before the final draft.
But the context of this language is about, others looking on down the road, and, the context is, being, running to the end of the church's property, the far end of the church's property.
Of the annexed land, actually,
Well,
everything is talked
annexed or
about.
not, Ron, it doesn't matter.
Yes,
In the
it-
context of this, it talks about credits will be given when others connect to the line, and the storm road will be determined later. Sidewalks will be put in on Dayton Road after the sewer line's installed.
Well, it matters because you had an
And that's-
annexation, you had a church.
The pond will be outside the utility service agreement area, which is partly is, partly isn't.
But everything
And
was,
it'll be paid on the other 6 acres when it's developed.
everything was based on the annexed land, nothing outside the land. You want it to go down outside the town so you can get your developers to get free lines on down there is what you want to do.
They're not my developers, Ron.
Yes,
All
they
I'm
are.
saying is, as it pertains to this agreement, what's any further
We all
than
know-
what we're talking about.
We all know said,
it
we
doesn't
all
matter.
said they would be oversized and we'd give them credits, somehow give them credits. Maybe not money back, we'd give them some kind of credits.
So,
Where is
and-
where's that stated?
well,
And that was-
according to this
But
right
it's not the
now,
one,
you
it's
guys
in
are kind of
all,
coming at the right time
It's
because
in all
it's
the
saying
drafts.
you need to
it's
add
in all, it's in our, it's in
connections,
our,
for future connections.
ordinances,
So
actually.
if there is a development coming in with the future connections, that's basically when it's saying the credit should be given, which would be around this time.
Look at the service utility agreement, draft number 6, that the board was talking about at that time.
All the side agreements kind of got the grass, remember?
If we're talking about board minutes from December, the draft copy number 6 was in play in December. The final service utility agreement didn't come into play until January when it was presented to the board. So, in January, the board and the church hadn't, or I'm sorry, in December, the board and the church was not working on this draft, or the final copy, they were working on draft number 6. And when you get into draft number 6,
What's your date on draft number 6? I'm curious.
I think that's December 10th, right?
12/3 and 12/10 was the next one.
there's some, December 10th on that, December 10th. Here's a December 3rd, date.
The latest date I see for draft 6 is 12/10, a little one.
Yeah, there's
Any
also,
conversation regarding that?
Yeah, I think 12.
there's also December 3rd,
We paid our money on the, let's see, December 3rd.
yeah, the 28th,
Yeah.
right.
And then you come up with a service agreement after we paid our money.
That-
Draft 6.
The money
And
that,
then we rejected draft 6 automatically because it was an increase over what we had been talking about before.
the money, that
We paid
is
for the
paid,
cost recovery fee.
yeah, and the cost recovery fee is the same for draft number 6 as it would be for the final draft number 7. Those numbers never change.
No.
Yeah. So what changed in between draft 6 and the final executed copy was the language was removed about extending down to manhole number 4, and the credit language was removed. Those are the two biggies that were taken out in between the draft and the
What I'm
executed.
saying, after we paid our money, then we were dumped with some extra projects, which were rejected by the church. We were dumped with some extras in that agreement that wasn't discussed before that time. And so it was rejected.
And,
Okay?
okay, I agree with you.
All right.
And Yeah, there's language in the board minutes from December's meeting that you were taking the service utility agreement, which would have been draft number 6, with you, and then in January's meeting, you presented the service utility agreement back to the town of Dayton at that meeting. And I,
Ashley, what were we trading? Because we're using the ordinances. Why would we be trading?
I don't
Not
know.
with those credits.
I was uninvolved in the, even though I was on the board, I was not actively involved with any negotiations or talk amongst the church and the town government. So all I have to go off of is what was executed, so evidently the church agreed to no oversized credits, and the town agreed to not going down to manhole 4.
And then the ordinance was thrown out at that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
It wasn't enacted or reacted on. So I'm assuming that we still would have credits if the ordinance was not changed.
There's nothing signed saying there is any credits due, so there is credits due by ordinance.
Why,
And the church,
Why is there
obviously
nothing
smart
in
enough
that?
between 6 and 7, I realize that they need to be there.
why is nothing in the contract?
It's already in the ordinance, they need to put it.
It's in the previous.
Why would it have to be put into contract if there's ordinance is already in place?
I don't know.
Well, it's the same, you know, on your cost summary, okay, it talks about acre foot, and, you know, for waterworks cost recovery is 18,000 times, you know, 1.76 acres, and then it gives a dollar amount. That's an ordinance also.
And that was all signed before we had permission to put in sewer line.
I guess I can't answer that, I don't know when you got permission or not, to
I
do
think
any
it
of
was
this.
2000.
So do you guys want to give them any credits at all for those oversized, no credits, or what are
Well,
you getting at?
if somebody would let me make a motion, move on to the next item.
Well, I'm asking that first before, once you make the motion, it's hard to stop it. I'm asking
You can
you
say
guys,
no.
you guys, just so we can talk a little bit, do you guys think there ought to be any credits at all, or just none? So we talk in these contracts about credits and everything, but it's left out of the final contract, but it's in our ordinances, our shop, our buyer's development guide in 3 different places by law that we gotta give them, we gotta pay for the oversizing. And it was in all the previous contracts, but the one they didn't sign, so we can throw all that out the window.
Exactly, what, it was in all the previous.
Yeah, okay,
ones.
well,
Why
you
would
throw
they
it out
leave
the
on
window,
final?
Mike, if that's the way you want to live your life, throw it out the window. We ought to do the moral thing that's right, split it, do something instead of just taking one little technicality and screwing the church over. You screwed them back then, Mike, you're screwing them now. You did it back then and the whole board did it.
Yeah.
You did too, I listened to you, I was
Yeah,
around.
just like the church tried to go around. and
Yeah,
it's not-
they don't pay taxes, so we're gonna screw it to them. We're gonna make them take it out of the field and take it over here, because they don't pay taxes, and we're gonna make them do it.
He's out of order.
That's what happened, that's what was said.
You better listen to him, Mike,
Make
he's
a-
telling you
make a
what to
motion. I'm
do.
done with this crap.
I'd go to court.
Yeah, go to court.
Yeah, I would, Mike. You guys you're not even following your own ordinances. You're not even, what do we make laws and rules of? You don't even follow them anymore. You take my mail and you steal it, Mike. That's against the law, and that's okay. You take my mail, my certified mail, you admitted
This
that
is-
you took it and didn't give it to
Don't get
me.
off
This is
topic.
uncalled for, this is,
You know? You guys do this all the time.
be a professional, Ron.
Yeah, you be a professional and do the right thing, Mike.
Yeah, like you
or
are, Ashley.
So Mark,
Start with them, we'll want to read it, what they want, we'll vote on it, and we'll go to.
I'd like to make a motion on number 2, and then we vote.
I'd like to make a motion on number 1 first.
Yeah.
Since we've been discussing 2 all this time. Let's just do 2 and then we can discuss it.
First, yeah,
Mike just made a suggestion, Ashley just changed the whole thing.
yeah, well, we know
Mike
who's
will do
calling
what
the
Ashley
shots,
wants.
it's obvious.
Can you please do a roll call vote, just so I have everybody?
So you guys just want one great big motion at the
No, I think
end
we
on 1,
should
2,
do-
and 3, and
Separate, just to go in order, so it's in the minutes in
that's
order.
what I was thinking.
Well, this is an order.
Does it work?
Like
Number
one,
14?
like 1, 2, 3. Do each one separately.
Well, we'll talk about 1 and make a motion on 2 and 3 some other times. Whatever you want to do.
Number 1 is a stormwater recovery fee of $23,230 was paid for services the town never provided. According to Indiana state statutes, municipalities have 2 years to provide service or return fees. And so they're asking for the $23,230 back. That's number 1.
Make a motion.
Go ahead and read number 2 out loud, just so I can-
Number 2 is in the agreement, a sewer was installed per town request, but no credit for oversizing was issued as required per town ordinance 99-6 passed 6/7/1999. Oversized credit of the sewer was $20,511 per Fairfield Contractors bid in 2001. That's number 2. Number 3 is the church borrowed funds that pay for sewer costs, stormwater recovery fees, and thus incurred interest, sewer oversized credit. The 2 interests are $20,000 times a 5% rate times 12 years, and the $23,000 times 5% times 15 years. So that's for the stormwater and the oversizing, it's $29,729. And then the last, to summarize it, the church requests the town, Dayton Utility Board refund $23,230 for the stormwater recovery fee. In lieu of any refund for sewer oversizing and interest, we request exemption of all future recovery fees, waterworks, wastewater, and stormwater on our 4.846 acres within the town limits, and our 13.874 undeveloped acres outside the town.
CNG station's got to be.
That's what they're requesting.
Per request, cash was an option besides the credits, because I think that was something you guys were comfortable with.
So that,
Cash was an option versus or credits.
oh, on the credit part of it.
Either one was an option. Going back the last 2 months, 3 months.
So I suppose we need to talk about number 1, the stormwater. I just read the assessment.
Stormwater recovery fee on number 1. Do you have any questions on that?
I agree with the church that they should receive the $23,230 back. I disagree on the state statutes and stuff that they reference, and I disagree with the interest. You know, the town had at the time, the town of Dayton had an ordinance, you know, that this fee would be collected and the town would build retention ponds to service certain areas. We have not done that, and I agree that not only the Dayton Methodist Church be refunded the money, but the other people that have paid into that fund should also receive their money back without interest.
So we can take these one by one? Or you want to approve it?
I would also,
One by one.
you know, I would also, you know, when this money is returned, you know, I think that there should be a release signed by each person that would receive that money. And, you know, not only for the stormwater recovery fee, but any other concerns that they may have with the town. You know, there's other things that come into play rather than just the stormwater recovery. I'd be open to other people's comments and thoughts on that. On the particular case of the church, it's kind of unique because we have a development coming that, these lines will be on church's property going to this development. And, we'll have a service utility agreement with the church that we have, and this M&C development will have a service utility agreement with them. I want to make sure that, that's a seamless, that those lines and easements and all that, go through in a seamless way, and one person isn't holding up the other one, and everybody's treated fairly throughout that process.
So what's the easements got to do with this right here? That's got nothing to do with this, right?
Well, when you read this service utility agreement, and I know that, you don't think
But
much of
this
it.
is stormwater recovery. You're talking about item 1 now. Easements have nothing to do with that. Just like easements on, easements on my property have nothing to do with Shady Lane or Wesley Drive, Ashley.
Okay,
But
There's language in here that, that the church agrees to allow, future development down the road, and I'm not gonna go into details on all that, sticking to the 3 points here,
so we ought to vote on, if anybody else wants to talk, I think we ought to refund the stormwater recovery fee on item 1. We can discuss number 3 when we get to it. I got a couple thoughts, but we never did the ponds like you said, Ashley, and I think we should return them that money. I think we should sign a thing that we returned it, and they can't go after us again for stormwater money, but I think that's the extent. It has nothing to do with anything else.
I think if the church wants to go after us for other items, it needs to be brought to light now and not later. And I think anybody else that has paid into that fee, and there's a number of,
6, 7 people that paid.
I think, that the agreement would be with all those.
Yeah, but are you saying you want them to sign something about the easements to get this money? With that, it has nothing, is that the same way you wanted me to, you'd correct Shady Lane if I signed the easements across the road?
No, I don't want any undue.
You're holding that over everybody again, Ashley. You're saying, we'll give you this 23,000 if you sign easements, is what you're doing.
For any money.
I don't think he is, Ron. So,
Okay, well, what easements are you talking about? He didn't say, let's leave the easements out. Let's make a motion on returning the money.
I want,
so it's standard, anytime you enter into a settlement agreement to get a release from that party.
I agree.
I think that's what we're discussing.
yes.
But it doesn't have anything to do with easements.
No, we're just talking about a
Well, he
release.
just said it's got to do with easements. I just asked him, and he said, yes, I want this cleared up, more or less about easements. It shouldn't have anything to do with easements.
The language of this, I want to be,
Are you talking about anything other than the scope of the release that we get from the church?
there's items in the service utility agreement about, bear with me, I'll find it here eventually, but there's one paragraph in here that's pretty short, I just want to make sure that, things go smooth in between the church and the developer on that.
No, we're not going to do that, actually. It's not going to be giving them the money, and as long as they okay that developer's giving all that, so that's what you're doing, actually. You did it to us, and you're doing it to the church.
No,
Either we're going to give them the money back or not, we'll give them a receipt, and they paid it, and they're not going to go after stormwater again. You don't need to add this and that and everything else in it.
I'm not adding anything other than what's in the service
No,
utility
you are,
agreement.
actually. This is,
I am.
that's utilities, this is stormwater recovery. We're not talking about that, we're talking about stormwater recovery.
We're talking about a service utility agreement, all this pertains to the service utility agreement.
Well, you're not gonna take the easements and everything and tie them to that thing. That's blackmail is what it is.
No,
Yes, it is,
you have a
actually.
contract in between two parties,
You're
and
blackmailing.
I want it to go smooth.
You're blackmailing them, Ashley.
Church of the developers.
I make a motion that we pay the stormwater recovery fee of $23,230 to the church.
Second.
A motion and second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Roll vote, please.
Wait, without any release?
You made the motion.
I think they more than fair for all
And
of
they just
us.
vote, they just
Yes.
vote.
Authorize me to negotiate.
I would like,
I mean, you're not gonna pay without a release.
I
No,
hope
you'll have a
not.
release, but
I
you're
hope
not gonna,
not.
you're gonna tie all the easements, and they gotta give easements and all that stuff into it?
No.
Okay, then Ashley wants that though.
I'm asking, I mean, you guys need to clarify the motion. So, it's your motion,
You know, not getting your writings that way is up here.
With the release, I think what he's just talking about is just the contract, which is something totally separate, which if they do or don't use it, that's a whole different court case that they could deal
I want
with.
the
This is
board-
just this.
I want the board to know, Tyrone, I think you said the MSC Development wants a meeting with us next week,
Surprise. Oh,
okay?
imagine that.
And the topic of that meeting is working on a service utility agreement with them.
So what's that?
And the email that was sent to all the board members from Michelle Watts at BFNS, they have some concerns. And some of those concerns, you know, nearly all of them are town, Dayton's concerns, but some of their concerns have to do with, you know, going across the church's property.
Can they get the easements down the
Yeah.
church's property, and he wants them to,
No.
they gonna get that money, you're gonna have to sign your
No.
life away.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying if,
Well, make it simple then, say what you
if
want.
the legal paperwork, if they agree to do legal paperwork in here for easements and stuff like that, and then somebody else finds out that that's not done yet, then that should be.
Well, what's that got to do with paying the stormwater? That easement's a separate thing. Stormwater, here's, we're talking about the stormwater. You give it back or you don't. It has nothing to do with those easements, Ashley.
Can you just make a motion, how you wanna vote, subject to
They made a motion.
the attorney working on, or at least that is gonna be sent back to you guys for review before you sign this?
Without easements, without blackmailing them for easements, right?
Ron, I am not trying to blackmail anyone.
No.
Yes,
We
you
have a
are.
service utility agreement. I want to make sure.
You're gonna blackmail them like you blackmail me, Ashley.
I amend my motion to not just a release,
Of course you do, because
a
I
legal
should
release.
too.
And Marshall, can we have them back here, like, silence, because we have a lot of disrupting if we're gonna do some Robert's rules.
Yeah. since
And there's
when?
one right there.
Yes.
Fifth time,
Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion.
Dave.
Yes.
Oh, just,
Can I talk?
You don't have the floor, you can't talk.
Well, we have a motion in progress, but
Don't.
He pointed to us.
oh, yeah, he raising his hand.
I was just clarifying that 2 meetings ago, I believe we agreed that we'd work on the release with the stormwater for each one individually. We did agree on that, so I don't want that to be an argument.
okay. Do we have a second?
Yeah, we're on
Second.
Second.
What is the full motion?
The motion is to pay the stormwater recovery fee of $23,230 and have a release added onto it to the Dayton United Methodist Church.
Before it's paid.
The motion to get, yeah, good, so, you say,
You said roll call vote?
yes,
Yes.
Tammy?
Tammy's yes.
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 Okay, moving on to number 2.
I make a motion that as described in number 2, oversized allowance is not in order per the service utility agreement signed by everybody on February 4th, 2012. That we do not issue any type of oversized credit.
Motion. Discuss.
You second it, Mike?
I'll second.
state what the vote is again.
Item number 2, under the request, under 3 requests for consideration, item number 2, I make a motion that an oversized credit not be issued based on the service utility agreement that was signed by the town of Dayton and the church. And the plans that were submitted with that service utility agreement.
I think we should look at credit, so
Yes?
Yes.
No.
Okay. So,
Item number 3?
they want to look into it more, huh?
Tammy, is that what you want to do, look into it?
I think we should have further discussion on that.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Okay, moving on, number 3.
Could we just clarify that that didn't pass for the record?
Yeah.
Correct.
Church will funds to pay sewer and stormwater cost recovery fee, that incurred interest.
I think we ought to split that, this is a suggestion, split it in half. Because Ashley brought up, I think there's stormwater, the interest, and there's sewer oversized credit. And we didn't decide on the oversized credit, so we probably shouldn't decide on the interest at this point. We probably should just, like I could make a motion to give the interest on the stormwater recovery fees. Because that's what we already okayed to give them back. And so the question is, should they get the interest on that monies that they spent out or not get the interest on it? So I make a motion to give them the interest on the stormwater recovery fees.
And I've provided a detailed memo, but I don't think the law supports their claim that that statute entitles them to interest. And I can go through it item by item. We don't have that type of ordinance is not in place, so the church is not a fee payer. We don't have an advisory board that the statute suggests as far as what would be required if you did have that type of ordinance. So, I'm just saying from the statute point of view, my recommendation is that does not apply. If you want to provide interest for some other
We can't.
reason, you can.
We can do it, though, if we want to.
Does Ron motion have a second? I would like to make a motion if it doesn't.
I'll second. Dies of lack of second.
I would make a motion concerning item number 3, that the town of Dayton does not pay any of the interest costs that the town, that the church is asking for.
Second. Roll call.
Can we state it again?
Item number 3, the church is requesting reimbursement for interest paid. The motion is not to pay anything in the form of interest to the request.
I agree with you.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
You guys ought to ask, I think the procedure is you ask all the members if they got anything to say, so you can't just
We have
shut it up.
3 items, so we go to 3 items.
All those in favor?
Well, there is a fourth
Aye.
item here, right,
I don't see that.
Mike? But that's it, just forget it. Don't let anybody talk, Mike.
See a fourth item. On the agenda.
That's fair.
You're expecting fair and Dayton Council.
There's a model of fairness.
Yes,
Well, I don't morally to actually.
Realize
Yeah, no, you show, you said you were shady lane,